Suddenly, panzers started rolling in the horizon, aiming to destroy the Soviet thrust and turn the tide of the war once more. However, the Russians were not surprised as they had prepared for such an offensive for a long time. The largest tank battle in history has begun. Hello and welcome to Daily History. Today, we will analyze the last major German offensive on the Eastern Front, and how the German aim to overcome their disaster in Stalingrad never came to reality. As the Battle of Stalingrad slowly grounds to its conclusion, the Red Army moved to a general offensive in the south. By January 1943, a 160 to 300 kilometer wide gap had opened between the German lines, and the advancing Soviet armies threatened to cut all German forces in the Caucasus. After a general retreat, the remaining forces were reorganized into Army Group South. The city of Kursk in southern Russia was retaken by the Soviets on the 8th of February 1943. And 10 days later, the Soviets liberated the major city of Kharkiv. After counterattacks by the Germans in mid-March, both the Wehrmacht and the Red Army were exhausted and the advance came to a halt. However, the counteroffensives left the Soviet salient extending 250 kilometers from north to south and 160 kilometers from east to west, centered on the city of Kursk. On the 10th of March, General Manstein presented a plan whereby the German forces would pinch off the Kursk salient, with a rapid offensive commenced as soon as the Rasputitsa had subsided. On the 15th of March, Hitler issued Operational Order No. 6, which called for the Kursk offensive operation, codenamed Operation Citadel, to begin the 3rd of May or shortly thereafter. Operation Citadel called for a double envelopment, directed at Kursk, to surround the Soviet defenders of 5 armies and seal off the salient. The Army Group Center will provide General Walter Model's 9th Army to form the Northern Pincer, while Army Group South will commit the 4th Panzer Army and Army Detachment Kampf to pierce the southern face of the salient. At the same time, Soviet intelligence received information about German troop concentrations spotted at Kharkiv, as well as details of an intended German offensive in the Kursk sector. The Soviet High Command concluded that a strategic defense would be better before going into the offensive, as it would draw the Germans into a trap if they were prepared. Preparation of defenses and fortifications began by the end of April, with a huge reinforcement of armored units, artillery, and infantry units, totaling around 1.5 million men, 5,000 tanks, and 31,500 artillery pieces. The Germans, meanwhile, had put together 520,000 men, 2,500 tanks, and 7,400 artillery pieces. The offensive was delayed almost 3 months from initial planning, giving the Soviets extra time to prepare. The green light was given on the 4th of July, with German infantry launching attacks to seize the high ground for artillery. In the north, General Zhukov of the Red Army ordered a preemptive artillery bombardment aiming to disrupt German forces. Following this bombardment, the Germans started advancing in the north, stalling after 10 kilometers. The Red Army started strategic counterattacks, while the German Army Group North concentrated its main forces for another push towards Kursk. However, by the 10th of July, the Soviets had completely halted the German advance in the region. Meanwhile, the Army Group South had advanced 29 kilometers, capturing small villages and breaking through the 1st and 2nd defensive belts. On the 10th of July, the 2nd SS Panzer Corps continued its attacks on Prokhorovka. However, the next day a Soviet counterattack managed to avoid a German breakout. With both thrusts stuck in a stalemate and the Western Allies landed in Sicily on the 14th of July, Hitler believed it was essential to stop the offensive and move the forces from Kursk to Italy, officially cancelling the operation 3 days later. The campaign only lasted 13 days and was a strategic Soviet success. For the first time in the war, a major German offensive had been stopped before achieving a breakthrough. The Germans, despite using more technologically advanced armor, were unable to break through the deep Soviet defenses and were caught off guard by the significant operational reserves of the Red Army. The German army had between 165,000 to 200,000 casualties throughout the battle, with the loss of around 760 to 1,200 tanks and assault guns. Meanwhile, the Soviets had around 700,000 casualties and around 6,000 tanks and assault guns were destroyed or heavily damaged. With this victory, the initiative was firmly passed to the Red Army. For the remainder of the war, the Germans were limited to reacting to Soviet advances and were unable to regain the initiative on the Eastern Front. Though the location, plan of attack, and timing were determined by Hitler, he blamed the defeat on his general staff, unlike Stalin, who gave his commanding generals the liberty to make important commanding decisions. All told, 239 Red Army personnel will bestow the USSR's highest degree of distinction, the title Hero of the Soviet Union, for their valor in the Battle of Kursk. From that point forward, the German Reich would never again have the strength to launch major offensive operations on the Eastern Front, relying on defensive operations until its fall on the 7th of May 1945.